London is full of all sorts of creepy tales. Some are true and some aren't. Sometimes it is difficult to distinguish what is fact and what is fiction, but regardless of truth, each and every one is a story, passed down by either word of mouth or written documents through the ages. Here, truth is nothing more than a maybe, a line that if pushed too far, you will cross into untruths. Perhaps there really is a vampire in Highgate Cemetery. Maybe there really is a ghost haunting Kennington Loop. Or maybe, just maybe, the royal family really are werewolves. I suppose we never will truly know, but one thing is for sure. Whether fact or fiction, stories like these intrigue our human brains, and so they live on through us. Now it is my turn to tell you a story. A story that might make you understand just why, when walking around London, you can't help but feel like you're constantly on edge. This is Speculative Superstitions. I'm your host, Beth Porter, and this is the story of London's plague pits. Between the Black Death in 1348 and the Great Plague in 1665, London suffered almost 40 lesser-known disease outbreaks. Striking roughly every 20 to 30 years, they killed at least 20% of London's population each time. But just where did these bodies go? The plague wiped out roughly 1/5 of the population in 1665, and because of the body count, it was simply too difficult to bury every single person in a proper grave. Instead, mass graves were established. These were otherwise known as plague pits. Hundreds of bodies were said to have been, for lack of a better term, dumped in these pits, without any care whatsoever. Everyone simply too worried to touch the victims in fear of spread of disease. There were no coffins, no ceremonies, just an uncaring, cold hole ready to swallow them up. And swallow them up it did. These pits were forgotten about, and the bodies within were left to decompose with the company of only their former neighbours, left alone and finally at peace. That is of course until 1863, when London opened its first underground railway. Tube historian and author Mike Horn once wrote, "In all of the work I have done, and am doing, I have never encountered anything that suggested real or imagined plague pits, influencing the construction of the London Underground." When looking at the early tube maps, however, that is hard to believe for those that love to speculate. The map certainly looks like it's hiding something. Why else would the tube lines swerve around so much? It's not like they're avoiding other tube lines, not then at least. So what's with all the meandering? The only theory that keeps popping back up is of course that the engineers were trying to avoid plague pits. Whether it was because they didn't want to disturb the dead, or because there were just too many bodies, packed together like really out-of-date sardines, it seems we will never know. It isn't uncommon to hear tellings of odd shapes or muffled cries where plague pits are said to be. Primarily, this is within the tube stations themselves. However, these places also include large empty lots, people not willing to chance unearthing a pit, or just plain refusing to build over them. One case in particular involves a bunch of schoolboys and a few not-so-fun dares. It isn't really a surprise to think that in a time of such widespread fear, crime may have been a little easier to get away with. It is even said that some were no doubt thrown into the pits whilst still alive, leading to the ghost story that those who walk past the site of the Charterhouse Plague Pit can hear the cries of those buried alive. Of course, with the pit being so close to a school, it was bound to have been taken advantage of at one point or another, and it was. Students daring each other to crawl along the grounds at midnight, to experience the fear that those that were buried alive felt. Some have even said that they could even hear the wails and cries of those underneath the ground, yelling for help. Now we don't know if this is true, but as said previously, I'm not here to tell you what is. I'm not here to debunk theories. I'm only here to speculate, and to continue passing on stories for others to annotate or cut into and dissect. There are many, many other stories involving plague pits and London, some of which we will be talking about and discussing now as I welcome my guest, Vienna Shelton.
Hello.
So Vienna, what is your take on plague pits? What do you think about them?
I guess, when were the plague pits a thing? Like, what year?
In 1665 was the Great Plague.
Okay.
So that's when there were so many bodies being thrown into the pits all at once because there was just not enough graves being built.
I mean, I guess in the time that it happened, and obviously everyone was dying really quickly, no one really knew what to do. it was a huge mess. I can understand why they would have to resort to something like plague pits.
they just wanted to get the bodies out of the way, really.
Especially seeing as I guess the dead bodies, they were a risk of infection as well. People didn't want to be getting the plague to begin with, so I can understand why they would do it. At the same time, that's really sad to think that, like, if a family member of yours died, they'd just be thrown in a pit with other people.
You don't get to give them a ceremony, nothing.
No, so I understand it, but it's morbid and it's sad.
Yeah, that's our history, though.
Yeah.
Do you think there are still plague pits that are unmarked? Because there are loads of actual marked plague pits. Like, for instance, do you think there are others that people are hiding from us?
I would assume that there's got to be at least one somewhere that we haven't
discovered.
Yeah, that we haven't discovered, obviously, because of just the pure amount of people that died and the haste that they were gotten rid of. There's got to be some somewhere. I'm not sure about hiding them.
Yeah.
I mean, is there a reason why they would hide them?
Well, we don't know. Why could they be hiding them? Maybe...
I guess maybe they'd hide them because they don't want people to be finding more pits full of bodies.
Yeah. Or maybe it's the state that they're in. But maybe they don't want people to see just what happened to these people.
Compact. Packed in, stomped down.
Like sardines.
Yeah. Yeah. Possibly. I'm sure there's definitely some that have just not been discovered.
Yeah. What about the ghost stories? Do you believe them?
That's a tough one. Because I personally believe that ghosts may exist. But I feel like if there were ghosts surrounding the people who were in the plague pits, there would just be so many ghosts.
Yeah. There was a lot of deaths.
A lot of deaths, a lot of bodies, a lot of unfinished business. Possibly, I think there may be ghosts.
Maybe.
But it would be very sad if there were that many.
What about the Charterhouse example? Do you think there really are people that are hearing those cries from underground? Maybe.
Because there are lots of examples of places where people hear things from stuff like that. Possibly. It makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah. Just what would you do if you experienced something like that?
If I heard cries.
If you heard the cries.
Being terrified. I'm not sure what I'd do, honestly. Maybe leave. I would be very scared. But what would you do?
Oh, I'd be scared out of my mind.
Would you stay there?
Get the salt out.
Get the salt out. I'd be scared. It'd be really scary to think that...
Just get a salt circle and hide in it.
It's scary to think that possibly there are whales and cries. Oh, that's sad as well.
Yeah, it's really sad. Alright, I'm gonna show you something.
Okay.
This is a tube map of the 1930s, right?
Yeah.
You see how widespread it is, how there all these little twists and turns. They could have just gone, left them. They could have just gone, straight and then left. But they have decided to go around this. It doesn't make any sense as to why they would do that. All of these swerves and curves. What do you think? Do you think there are actual plague pits that they're trying to avoid?
There may be. It's definitely a chance. There's definitely a chance that in those little spots where they've winded the tubes around, that there might be plague pits there. As much as there might be plague pits there might also be other
Something
things,
else,
rocks, things they couldn't get past. So it's a bit of a 50-50 there.
What do you think? Do you think people are right not to build over the possible plague pits? I mean, it's likely a place you once had a picnic on was actually a possible plague pit.
I would say that to not... Because essentially the plague pits are mass graves. And you don't build over graveyards.
But considering London's overcrowding... You kind of need to.
Maybe, but if you think about it, if there's already reports of people hearing wails and cries, do you want to risk building... Say we're thinking about possibly there are ghosts of all these dead people.
Yeah.
Do you really want to be disturbing them? That's the thing. It all depends whether you believe in it.
So there was a case, I'm not sure which building it was, but there was a building in central London somewhere And in the building there's a basement. The basement ceiling is pretty low, so they assumed that because of the wails and the cry that they were hearing in this building, this really, really old building, they thought that maybe it has something to do with plague pits. They couldn't dig any further down because there was a plague pit underneath them. This building also has its own water supply, and the employees refused to drink the water supply out of fear of it being contaminated. And there are people saying that if you unearth a plague pit now, there is still a chance that the plague is still alive in the soil and will come back.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's can you imagine now? It would be a bit easier.
It would be easier because they'd be able to treat it.
Yeah, like they know what it was. They know how to deal with it.
I doubt it would cause as much mass death, but still it's scary.
It's scary to think about.
And again, that even solidifies maybe you shouldn't build on them.
Yeah.
Because don't build on them.
Just don't build on them.
But the way I see it, it's just, regardless of whether it's going to contaminate anything or anything like that, you shouldn't disturb what's basically a mass grave. It's more or less building on a graveyard. There's just no tombstones.
Yeah, it's not nice. It's really scary, actually.
I'd rather have a picnic over a place that is a plague pit buried.
So you'd rather have a picnic over someone's grave? Over 100 people's graves?
You can sit like in a graveyard and like have a sandwich.
Yeah.
It's different than building a whole building on it.
Okay, yeah, I get
And then
that.
having like going into the kitchen in that building and cooking. Like, it's different.
Isn't it like those things on TV where you see like Indian burial thing? What are they called?
Like, what is it? Is it
Indian burial ground or something?
Native American burial grounds, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know.
It's like the Red Indian burial grounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they said that like there's whole curses involved.
Yeah. It's just not worth disturbing, is it? You ask me, just leave it alone.
Yeah, there's an urban legend that was created from whisperings that every pothole in the road, every bump in a tube journey, every roundabout is a plague story. What do you think about that? Do you think like every roundabout is actually a mass grave?
Every roundabout.
Every roundabout.
Maybe not every roundabout.
That's what some of the stories say. So every bump in the tube, every roundabout.
Tube, oh, that's creepy. Bump in the tube.
Bump in the tube.
The way you said that, it makes it sound like the train's like driving over a body like this.
Well, they probably are.
That is creepy. In terms of the roundabouts, there's just so many roundabouts. I'd say probably not.
I cross like 3 roundabouts every time I'm having driving.
Plus, we kind of need the roundabouts for things, so I can imagine them building them and it not being because there's a plague pit. But it's interesting to think about.
Well, there's a place called Mortlake, and there is a plague story evolved around that. They said that bodies of victims would sink into the lake, and that's how they dubbed it as Mortlake. Can you imagine living next to that?
Sounds horrible.
Yeah. But I can't remember. I think mort means death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it like Latin? Do you want to know how I know that?
Voldemort?
No. There's a horror movie, and it's one of the demons in the horror movie says something like Memento Mori or something. Yeah.
Sure it wasn't Harry Potter?
No. And then the guy with the dice is like, that means death. So that's how I know. But that's what, Death Lake?
Yeah.
Morbid.
And living next to that is kind of creepy.
Yeah. Move house.
There is a tale in the Bakerloo line, which, for anybody who doesn't know what the Bakerloo line is, it's a section of the London Underground. It's a line.
It's
one of the lines.
The lines in the transport.
On the way to St John's Wood from Baker Street, which is now part of the Jubilee line.
Okay.
There is a point where passengers' ears pop, and people say that is where the tube dips to go underneath a plague pit.
Oh my gosh.
You're not going to be able to go on that train now, are you?
That's really... You would never think that. You just think, oh yeah, we're underground, so our ears are popping, but there's got to be a reason that your ears weren't popped before, but then they are.
Apparently that's the reason. So you just dip really quickly.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Whenever I'm on the tube, I always think, like, it's so morbid, I'm always like, we could be going past dead bodies right now. It's not necessarily to do with plague pits, it's more to do with the fact that you're underground and you technically are side by side with dead bodies if you're going past a graveyard. It's really creepy. I don't know why did they do this? Why can't they just, like, build up?
I guess they didn't have any room to put all the train lines, did they? Because imagine how many train lines there are in the London Underground. If all those were overground.
I don't mean overground, I mean, like, up in the sky.
You mean, like, those rails that are on, like, those stilts?
Yeah,
with
let's do sky trains. Sky trains better than tubes. The Piccadilly line between Knightsbridge and South Kensington stations has to bend around Brompton Oratory to supposedly avoid another plague pit. And there's a station, Bank Station. I think it's right next to, where is it? Is this in Central?
Don't know.
Anyway, Bank Station is the heart of the city, often complained about because of its smell. There are people who say that it smells like an open grave. And apparently that comes from the fumes wafting up from the pit of Liverpool Street Station.
That's really gross.
Yeah, they say that Liverpool Station is built atop of a plague pit, the entire station.
You never think about these things, do you?
No.
It's what, a whole station smells like death because of a plague pit.
I'm tempted to go to Bank Station now just to smell.
But
like, does it really?
Imagine a pure amount of people that must have been buried there for that to still stink of death.
And there's been more than one case of that. People saying that.
Because, like, those bodies are all skeletons now.
Yep.
But it still stinks. Like, that's because it must have seeped into the soil. Just that many bodies.
It doesn't. It's not nice.
No.
It's a horrible thing.
Yeah, it is.
But it's very interesting.
Yeah, it is. Makes you think.
And finally, this is the last point I have. The Victoria line, which is another line. The Victoria line cut through a plague pit in the 1960s.
Cut through it.
And according to Mike Heffernan, who is somebody who writes on the Unexplained Mysteries website, a huge tunnel boring machine ploughed straight into a long-forgotten plague pit at Green Park, traumatising several brawny construction workers on site. Again, we don't know if this is true, we can't validate this, but we can also not completely debunk it. We have to talk about this.
Imagine being one of those construction workers.
Exactly, that's what I'm thinking, like, traumatised.
Conversation is traumatising me. Like, imagine coming across that just on your... At work, you're just working.
Yeah. You've built a bunch of train lines before.
And
then you come into that. Like, imagine you're building a tunnel, and you start breaking the next rock, and then a hand just falls out or something. A head.
oh.
I love how you can't see her face, but it's entertaining.
It's just really gross and really sad. Like, those people's relatives.
Yeah, it's horrible, but I can't help but find the humour in the situation.
There's a hand.
Ooh, there's a hand. Oh,
there's
do you need
a skull.
hand? Someone's like, "Oh, come help me with this." Oh, do you need a hand?
Skeleton. Nice to meet you. Oh my gosh. You've taught me something new today.
Oh, you're welcome. I mean, I don't know if it's a good thing or not, but it's
an interesting thing.
It's an interesting thing. But anyway, I think that's everything that we have to say about this topic at the moment. I just wanted to make a disclaimer. No disrespect to anybody who has had relatives that died in the plagues, and if you are a ghost and you're listening to this, please don't haunt me, because I will get the salt out. You're right there.
Yeah.
Alright, thank you for listening. I've been Beth Porter, and this has been Vienna Shelton, and this has been
Speculative
Superstitions.
Superstitions.
And this has been Speculative Superstitions. That was cheesy. Alright, thank you for listening.